Hello everyone, today's webinar is on accelerating insights through faster data. Our presenters are Emma McGrattan, Actian Senior Vice President of Engineering, and our guest speaker is Erin France from Looker, and she's a Senior Technology Alliances Manager. And together they'll tell you how the synergies between Actian and Looker and how you get great value. So with that, I'll pass you over to Emma. And before I do that, just to remind you, enter your questions using the Q&A feature, and we'll get to those as soon as the presentation is over. Go ahead, Emma.
Great, thanks Pradeep. So as Pradeep said, my name is Emma McGrattan and I'm Senior Vice President at Engineering here at Actian, responsible for the development of our relational database and analytics technologies. Actian is a company that I'm hoping you've heard of because you've signed up for our webinar today, but we have been in the data space for over 30 years. We started life in the database business with the original Ingress database back in the 80s, and we have a broad portfolio of data-related products broken down into three key areas. So the first and most interesting to me right now, because it's a very cool area of investment for us and research, is hybrid cloud data warehousing. We also do mission critical data management. Companies around the world get their business on our relational database technologies every day, as well as our data integration technologies, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. So Actian has over 3,000 customers around the world, and the one thing that they all have in common is that they have bet their data infrastructure on our technologies. We pride ourselves on our customer satisfaction, so any customer engaging with our support organization is provided with a survey at the end of that engagement, and they have rated us in excess of 95% in terms of their satisfaction with support. And where that really matters is if you think about, when do you pick up the phone or open a ticket with a support organization, right? Typically it's not when you're at your best and you've hit a problem with a technology that you can't solve yourself in reading documentation or Googling around. So being able to engage with a support organization and coming out of that very satisfied, I think is huge. That's a 24/7 follow the sun support organization, and they have an average tenure of well over a decade. We are doing some really cool and innovative research and development work in my team, and we have a number of patents in that area, so in excess of 50 patents around analytics and data. And we are priding ourselves and continue to pride ourselves in the fact that we're number one in terms of the performance we can deliver for an analytics workload. Actian has a footprint in 24 of the Fortune 100, so used by large organizations every day. And as I said, the one thing our customers have in common is they've bet their business operations on our data products. And we're going to talk a little later about two key customers for us. One is the University of Oxford, and the second is the AA. And what we'll see across the bottom of the screen here is a bunch of logos. Some of them may be familiar to you. If we talk about one in the center of the screen there, Revenue. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm from Ireland. Revenue is the Irish equivalent of the IRS, and they do all of the tax and import and export duty collection, all of that managed on top of Actian technologies, including the Actian Avalanche solution that you're going to hear more about today. So the other thing to note is that while Actian is a relatively small company, we have a strategic investment from a company called HCL. HCL is a global systems integrator that's doing over $10 billion a year in business. So some deep pockets there, and some very fun joint engagements that we've undertaken with HCL to solve some challenges for our joint customers. So what I'd like to talk to you about is Actian Avalanche. So Actian Avalanche is Actian's hybrid cloud data warehousing technology. Now, let me start off by saying, why did Actian build a hybrid cloud data warehousing technology? So the first was that we saw a need in the market to deliver fast insights for large numbers of concurrent users across large volumes of data. So there are technologies out there that solve this problem for smaller data sets, for smaller numbers of concurrent users. But when we go out and we talk to the enterprise, typically what the enterprise wants to do is to give everybody who's making a decision for the business access to all of the data that they need to make the best decision for the business. So we wanted to solve a problem where they want to give everybody access to Looker, right? Everybody should be able to deliver those insights from the data, to drill in, to do their own ad hoc querying. So that's really important to our customers, that broad base of business users having access to fast insights. The next was the need to bring in a variety of data sources. So Actian has, as I mentioned earlier, a data integration portfolio, and that data integration portfolio allows us to reach out to a variety of sources. So it could be reaching into your Salesforce instance to get information about customer contact and pull that data into the data warehouse. You may be running SAP sitting on top of an Oracle database on premise. Again, we've got the ability to hook in there and to bring data back from that application into the data warehouse. We also deal with data lakes, whether those are Hadoop data lakes or more modern data lakes where people are landing a variety of sources on S3 or ADLS, and they want us to reach in again and pull data into the warehouse, or make data sets from those sources part of the data ecosystem that they're pulling together in a warehouse. We also wanted to provide architectural flexibility. And what I mean by this is the ability to deploy the data warehouse wherever it makes sense for your business. And oftentimes when we start a conversation with a prospect about their desire to move to a cloud data warehouse, there will always be some hesitance about their ability to move lock, stock, and barrel to the cloud. They may have some workloads that they prefer to keep on premise. That may be because they have regulatory compliance requirements that dictate that, or it may just be that their CISO is more comfortable with some of the data assets remaining on premise. So what we've built is a technology that can be deployed on premise or in the cloud, and we're not forcing you to choose one over the other. And indeed, you could choose both. You could have a footprint on premise as well as footprints across the public cloud environments, and Actian provides for that architecture. And then the last thing on here is that because we've been around for a long time, our software is designed really for a scarcity of resources. And when we deploy this in a world of abundance that is the cloud, what we're able to deliver is a really attractive price point, right? So incredible value, and we can show that value in the first day of undertaking a proof of value with you. So being able to leverage commodity hardware, and cloud is nothing but commodity hardware at scale, commodity operating systems and commodity infrastructure was important to us. So you don't need to have a very expensive appliance or server for our technology. It just runs on commodity and delivers incredible value for money. So that's what Actian Avalanche was designed to solve. And we have designed it for performance at scale. We deliver it as a fully managed service. So you as a consumer should just need to identify your data assets, load the data into the environment, and you can start querying right away. You don't need to become an Avalanche expert. We've got the expertise built up within our organization, and we manage that for you. As I've mentioned, we're available today for public and private cloud, and we're in the process of developing a VPC, a virtual private cloud, and this is where you have infrastructure provisioned in either Azure or an AWS, and you want us to reach into your VPC or your cloud infrastructure and deploy our managed service in there. And we're delivering that on Azure shortly, and it's exciting for a number of reasons, primarily around security, right? If you want to take advantage of the managed service, but to have the comfort of knowing that your data is sitting on disks that are controlled within your cloud infrastructure. We provide that direct connectivity to SaaS apps. I gave you an example of reaching into Salesforce to get your context information. That could just as well be NetSuite or ServiceNow or Workday or Marketo, or whatever those business applications that you're using that are SaaS-based, as well as traditional applications. And then we have designed it for what one would expect in terms of cloud economics. So paying only for what you use, growing the environment to meet peak demand, and then shrinking it back to whatever your regular requirements may be with respect to the infrastructure that you're using. So you're only paying for what your business needs at that moment in time, and you can grow and shrink that as your business needs grow and shrink. So that elastic scalability is interesting. The other thing that we've done that we felt was important, because we're a group that forgets to turn the lights out as we leave the building in the evening, was we've built into the product. It recognizes the fact that there have been no new queries issued to the database for a period, and it's already a period of time since its last query completed, and it can automatically shut down the service, and then you can schedule when you want that to restart. So if you know that all of your business analysts are going to be ready at 8 a.m. in the morning, you want the service started for their start time, you can schedule that. So important to be able to identify it's not being used and to shut it down automatically. And then we've built out a set of migration tooling to enable the migration from legacy data warehouses over to Actian Avalanche. So what this will do is analyze all of the data objects within your database environment, build out a plan for migrating those objects over to Avalanche, as well as analyzing things like database procedures and automating the migration of those data assets. So I mentioned performance a couple of times, and that's because that's something that we really are maniacal about. And what we've done here is represented on the screen a benchmark, and this is a TPCH, so that's an industry standard decision support benchmark, executed at 10 terabytes by a third party engaged by Actian to make sure that we weren't playing any tricks. And they ran this same benchmark against Snowflake, Redshift, and Avalanche with a single user, which is what we encounter mostly when we're dealing with proof of concepts or proof of values. And then we run it at 20 users, which is more like what we encounter in the real world. So 20 concurrent users typically represents about 200 active users in the system. It's 20 hitting enter at exactly the same time and issuing a query at exactly the same time. What you'll see represented to the right of the graphs is the time taken to complete the 22 queries that make up this benchmark. So if you look at the for single user, it took Snowflake almost 3,000 seconds to complete the queries. It took Avalanche 350 seconds to complete those queries, so quite a difference. Now that difference grew as we grew the number of concurrent users. So for 20 concurrent users, this represented over 21,000 seconds for Snowflake and just under 2,000 seconds for Avalanche. Now, there's two interesting things here, right? So the first is obviously that we can outperform them in a like-to-like configuration. But the second is that if performance at 10 times what Snowflake delivers isn't what your business needs, what you could do is scale back the resources being allocated so that you're saving money, but at the same time improving the performance that's delivered. So maybe being twice as fast as Snowflake is going to be more than enough for you today to succeed in your market. You can do that at a much reduced price point. So that's something that I find really interesting, because we've designed, as I said, for getting the most out of commodity resources, and that comes across really well in terms of both price and the performance we can deliver. If we were to talk about some of the more mundane parts of the solution, it is an MPP and relational database. And what that means is that if you're migrating from a legacy system, whether that's Teradata, Netezza, Exadata, even some SQL Server technologies, over to Avalanche, it will feel very familiar and it'll be a very straightforward migration. We have separated storage and compute in our Azure solution, and what that allows you to do is to grow the compute resources to meet your business needs without having to pay for the additional storage that may not be required, right? Typically, it's that you want to beef up the compute, you haven't changed the data volumes that you're dealing with, and we provide the ability to grow those resources independently. We have dynamic elastic scalability, so you can scale up and scale down as your business needs change. And we're very focused on being standards compliant. So we actually sit on and hold the chair actually of the SQL language body right now. And so as we add new features into the database, we always make sure that we do it in a way that's standards compliance. And what that means is that if you move to or from our technology, you're usually in pretty good shape in terms of how straightforward that migration may be. Our latest release adds support for inbuilt JSON SQL functions, and we're seeing quite a bit of demand for that in the financial services space. Security is something that has been built in from the ground up. As I mentioned earlier, Actian has been in the data business for over 3 decades, so we understand what it is to secure mission-critical data. If you think about the use case I referenced earlier with the revenue commissioners, every tax return that is filed with the revenue commissioners, that needs to be locked down pretty tight, right? And they know that they can bet their business on our technology because they have the comfort that we've got all of the security controls in place to enable them to have that confidence that the data is secured. And as with many cloud services, proving the security, proving the processes that we have in place for managing the environment has all been audited, and we've been awarded SOC 2 compliance for the Avalanche solution. Inside the technology, the performance characteristics that we deliver are kind of grown from a combination of factors. First off is that we use vectorized processing. So what this means is that we, instead of dealing with a record at a time as we're doing computations, we deal with arrays of data at a time. So a vector is nothing but an array, and we're able to do things like, if we were adding 1,000 values to a separate 1,000 values, we would do that in a single operation, as opposed to having to go record at a time through those 1,000 values. We use the CPU cache as our execution memory. So again, really fast, right? Modern CPUs are built with a few megs of cache on board. So leveraging that gives us a huge performance benefit. It's a columnar database. Here it says columnar storage, and certainly we do store the data as columns, but we also, that data lives its life as a column. It never gets manifested at rows until it's returned to the application like Looker. We've got the ability to support updates happening in the environment that don't impact the performance of the running system. If you're familiar with columnar database technologies, you know one of the biggest challenges is actually handling those real-time updates coming in. We've built this technology to provide for operational insights into what's happening inside your business, so you can feed those updates into the warehouse, and as soon as we say they're committed, all subsequent reports that are run will see the results of those updates. To make it simple, we automatically build out storage indexes on all the data that's stored within the warehouse. So that makes it really easy for us when we're solving queries to identify the blocks that are going to be used to solve those queries, or more importantly, to know which are the ones to skip, right? So we don't bother reading those. And then federated query is a capability we'll deliver later this year, which will give us the ability to write a single query that will be able to bring data from our on-premise and multi-cloud environments together from behind a single pane of glass. So we've really built this Actian Avalanche solution to change the economics of insights and to provide really fast insights on the freshest data in the environment. And we can load data 5 to 30 times faster than the competition. We'll produce results for your analytics workloads in 10 to 1,000 times faster than the alternatives that you may be using today. And then we've built it with open standards in mind. So being able to take the investment that you've made today in dashboards and reports and applications that are pointed to the database, it was really important for us to be able to do that very simply and provide support for all the most popular tools that are used for analytic applications. Now, to talk about a couple of customer successes that we have and kind of show you what we can do with the technology. So the first is the AA. So the AA is the Automobile Association, or formerly was the Automobile Association in the US, in Ireland and in the UK. And their counterpart in the US is the AAA. And what I learned this morning is apparently the AA was started in 1905, and it was designed to help motorists avoid police speed traps. So what they did was they sent patrols out on bicycles that would notify drivers that there were speed traps up ahead. And this was later judged to be criminal because they were interfering with police operations. So they got a little smarter about how they did that. And they had a code whereby if you had an AA sticker on your car windscreen, an AA patrolman would salute you as you were driving by if there was not a speed trap ahead, so you would need to slow down. So that's a long and distant past for them. Today, the services that the AA provides includes vehicle insurance, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about because that's the use case where Actian Avalanche is used with Looker at the AA today. They also provide roadside assistance, driving lessons, maps and travel guides, and a myriad of other services. So the AA participates in these insurance comparison websites. I'm sure you're familiar with them, right? So as you're looking for car insurance and you enter your information into a website, it will go out to all of the top providers and get you a list of quotes. So what we learned in working with the AA is that top billing is given to the insurers who can deliver those quotes quotes the quickest, right? So what the AA wanted to do was to be able to provide a quote in less than a second so that they would get top billing on these insurance comparison websites. And to do that, they use a combination of technologies from Actian as well as from Looker. So on the Actian side, what they do is, as you provide the quote information by filling in their online form, they use an Actian technology called data flow to analyze that data and to enrich it with data from sources like credit ratings, information about the car that you're trying to insure and its accident history, whether or not the applicant has a history of insurance fraud and so on. So basically, taking the information that was provided, enriching it with information from other sources, and then if the applicant is a good risk, they will provide a quote. That quote needs to be competitive, but it also needs to reflect the risk that the AA would be taking in underwriting that insurance policy. So a lot goes into that, and that all has to happen in less than a second, right? So quite a bit of work being done to analyze, to take in the data, to parse it, to enrich it, and to generate that quote to make sure it's competitive and provide it back to the insurance comparison website. With respect to their use of Looker, and we recently asked them about that to prepare for today's webcast, and they said that they were using Looker in other parts of the business, and when they were looking to solve an analytics challenge with Vector, where they wanted to provide their business users with access to the information and the ability to drill down into it, because they had a lot of success with Looker in other parts of the organization, it was kind of a no-brainer to set up a proof of concept with Looker together with Vector. That evaluation went really well, so they said the decision for them was a no-brainer to use Looker. They really like being able to drill into the information and to give their business decision makers kind of that ad hoc querying capability, so they can do their own drilling down into the information. They really like the fact that they can pass a URL to somebody else within the organization to share information. It's just as simple as that, passing over a URL. There's nothing to install, nothing to configure, it just all works. And they said that just like Actian, support is excellent. That was in all caps. They really love the support they get. So all in all, the AA said they're really happy with this combination of technologies from Actian and from Looker. And today they're running Actian Avalanche on premise, but they have plans to get to the cloud later this year, to at least start that process. Another customer we have is the University of Oxford. University of Oxford is very well known and respected in Europe. I suspect that many people in the US are also familiar with it. And where our technology is being used is in their clinical trial services unit. And that clinical trial services unit is investigating the causes of premature deaths and trying to find cures, obviously, to those causes of premature death. And that will include things like cancer and heart disease and strokes. What they're doing is they're collecting a lot of information about more than 500,000 people who've volunteered to give them data points for their biobank project. So for each of these 500,000 people, they're collecting many thousands of data points. It'll include things like, whether or not they smoke, how much they smoke, drinking habits, eating habits, exercising, and so on. And what they're trying to do is to get to causation of these diseases, and then obviously to get to preventing them happening. So what they do is they work with research organizations around the world. They provide them with data from the study that they've undertaken. They need to be able to analyze this data really quickly, and they find that with Actian Avalanche, again running on premise, that they can deliver this in a matter of minutes, whereas with the technology they previously used to do this, it would have taken them days to be able to deliver on what they can do now in a matter of minutes. So those are two of our many customer success stories. I'd invite you to visit our website to learn more about what customers are doing with our technology. All of them are fascinating, and the more you dig into it, the more impressive it is at what they're able to achieve with the technology that we can deliver. So if I was to summarize, what's so special about Actian Avalanche? So the first, and what I'm so proud about, is the industry-leading performance that we can deliver on, right? So we've designed this for large volumes of data, large numbers of concurrent users with very complex queries. We deliver this on-premise and across public clouds. Today we're on AWS and Azure. Later this year, and the plan is to deliver with Google Cloud Platform as well. We've designed this for commodity environments so we can deliver a superior TCO. Think back to the slide where we compared the performance of Actian Avalanche versus Snowflake, right? And I said, if you didn't need to be 10 times faster than Snowflake, you could and that would be at the same price point as Snowflake, you could be twice as fast at a much reduced price point. So important to deliver on that TCO. And then the integration technologies that are part of our portfolio are an extension of the warehouse and give you the ability to reach out into a variety of sources and to pull that data into the warehouse. So I'm going to turn it over to Erin now to talk about Looker and give you guys some insight into what can be achieved with Looker and some of the successes that they've had in customers beyond those that I've referenced today. So over to you, Erin.
Thank you. Yep, I'm Erin. I'm going to just give a quick overview of Looker as a product, and of course how we integrate with Actian Avalanche. So you can go to the next slide. So this slide just kind of covers three kind of differentiators that really encompass how Looker is architected. So Looker is a data platform. It's really designed for these modern data warehouses like Actian Avalanche, where the power and performance can be directly leveraged at a reasonable price point. So we want to make sure we're not abstracting away from the power and performance of the underlying data warehouse and do all that transformation in the database itself. So that way we're not moving data into our own servers. We're not abstracting away from the real-time nature of the data in the database. The way that Looker is able to do this is via SQL. So instead of moving data into our own tool, we're just going to execute queries back to the database. How we do this in a way that's scalable, that has governance, is via LookML, which is our modeling layer. So LookML is really an abstraction of SQL. Instead of defining one-off queries for building, singular reports, you're instead building a library of business logic that's really just, parts of queries that are exposed to the end user in a click and drop interface from which all reports, dashboards, anything that any data that's going to be consumed from the Looker platform will have been defined in that LookML modeling layer. And then finally, Looker is born of the web, born of the cloud. It's you just access it via the browser, which makes it really easy to share, collaborate, make a part of your workflow. And then on the next slide, I'll show kind of what that looks like simply. So, going back to the original point, Looker is really a web application. It doesn't store data, so we take advantage of that underlying database by defining all the data in LookML. All of that is available via our API. So we have 110% API coverage, or we strive for it, meaning anything you can do in Looker, you can also do via our API. So you can surface results from Looker via our API as well. And then Looker is deployed, generally speaking, on the cloud of your choice. So we are available as a service on AWS and GCP. We will support Azure in the future. We do have customers who deploy Looker in their own VPCs or on premises when necessary as well. It's really just a jar file at single tenant, so our customers are accessing their own Looker. But because Looker doesn't store data, it can access databases on premises as well as in the cloud, and as well as in different clouds, regardless of where it's actually being deployed and maintained. So the next slide, we'll just go over the different use cases for Looker. So building on sort of Looker's architecture, of course, you connect to your database. We recommend our customers, consolidate as much of that, data as possible, where they're trying to do analyses across different sources into one single point, like a Actian Avalanche, of course. But if you have other data sources as well, you can connect those to Looker too, and serve dashboards and reports on side by side on the same databases. But because we do rely on SQL, centralization of data is super important. The first use case, and really Looker's core would be modern BI and analytics, of course. So, exploring data, performing analysis on it, creating dashboards for internal consumption, just using the product itself. But Looker is, we position as a data platform, as it mentions in the beginning. There are use cases outside of BI that it definitely solves as well. So the second one being integrated insights. So not only consuming data from Looker directly in the application itself, but also bringing that data into other applications where people are doing work. So a simple example of this is, embedding Looker into Salesforce. Account managers can see usage metrics, as an example, on those accounts in the context of where they're looking up information. Another example of how you can use Looker is to power data-driven workflows. So taking the data that has been curated in Looker and using that data in downstream applications. Looker has a native scheduling capability, which of course you can send reports just via email, but you can also send data to file systems, to third-party applications using a whole collection of integrations we've built out under what we call the Action Hub. And then you can also build on our API or use our webhooks capability to send data wherever it needs to go. So as an example of that, you could create audiences in Looker to power a marketing automation tool to send email campaigns, either on a schedule or one-off, directly from the data that you've curated in Looker. And then finally, and a large percentage of our customers do this, building custom applications on Looker. So Looker's powered by Looker is what we call it, basically is our OEM or embedded analytics offering. So you can take almost all of the Looker application and embed that via iframe or JavaScript into your own application to serve results of data to external data consumers, or even internal data consumers if you want to build a more specific UI for the application you're looking for. And then of course, because we have an API, you can build whatever front end you'd like on top of Looker's data platform and use Looker, as that business repository and query engine behind the scenes, and build whatever you'd like on top of that. And with that, I think that's all I had to cover on Looker today. So I think we'll go back for Q&A.
Great, thanks, Erin.
Great.
I'm sorry, over to you, Pradeep.
Oh, no, thank you both Emma and Erin for the presentation. We do have a couple of questions on the Q&A already. Just remind everyone to enter their questions on Q&A. If you can browse the Q&A and pick off the questions for yourselves.
Sure, I'll take the first one. So it asks, what do we mean by the separation of storage and compute? Yeah, this is something that one of our competitors, Snowflake, initially started with an architecture that was designed for the cloud. And what they recognized was the fact that in cloud, you can consume infrastructure resources at a pace that makes sense for your business. So you can pay for storage, you can pay for compute, but you shouldn't have to pay for compute. I'm sorry, you should only have to pay for the compute that you're using. The reason they thought this architecture was important was when they looked at the incumbent at the time, which was AWS Redshift. Redshift is designed such that the storage and compute are tightly coupled. So as you need to add more compute into the environment, you need to add more storage, and you need to redistribute the data across that additional storage that you've brought in. So there's an additional cost overhead because you have to pay for that additional storage. But then there's also the overhead of having to redistribute your data so that it's covered in the additional volumes that you've added. So what Snowflake did was very clever. They said, look, we'll put all of the storage, all of the data in one storage location, like S3. So you've got all your data sitting on S3, and then your compute resources can scale as you need. So we looked at that and we said, wow, that's really clever. We would like to provide a similar capability with Avalanche, whereby we have the data sitting on ADLS, which is Azure Data Lake like storage. And then our compute nodes are separate to that. And as you, if you're working in an environment where you have workloads that change at different times of year, so maybe it's that at the end of quarter, you want to bring in a lot of additional compute power because you're doing a lot more analysis of the data to close out your quarter. We've got the ability to grow that compute resource pool, analyze the data that you need, and then to shrink that resource pool back down to what it would be during the course of your normal business operations. So growing and shrinking the resource pool as you need it is important. The example I just gave you is, end of quarter or end of year, you may have much more needs. But this could be much more granular, right? It may be that every Monday morning when you come in, you do an analysis of your sales for the prior week, and you want to set the prices for the week ahead. Let's say you're in retail, and you want to, for Monday morning, you want to scale up the resources, but the rest of the day kind of goes back to a steady state where you're just dealing in your dashboards, and then overnight you're doing very little work, right? So you want to have that minimized to handle any batch jobs that might run in the overnight hours. So you've got the ability to, to that level of granularity to scale the resources to meet what it is your business needs. And obviously, as we become much more cost aware because of everything that's going on right now, and being able to scale back and just use exactly what the business needs at a moment in time becomes really important, because you're just paying for what the business needs at a moment in time. So a rather convoluted explanation of what separation storage and compute is, but really it's the ability to scale your compute resources without the need to scale your storage resources as well. Okay, Erin, looks like there's a question in here for you. And I'll ask it of you, right? There are many other products that create business models. How does Looker exploit all that knowledge? Can it contribute its knowledge to others?
I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to in terms of the tools that where you create business models, but we are building integrations with data catalog products like Actian and Calibra, so they can consume via our API all the metadata around the content in Looker, the dimensions and measures that you've leveraged to create those reports in Looker, the underlying SQL, so you can look at the data lineage, things like that. The model that in Looker I mentioned is text-based, so we actually just leverage Git repositories to manage that version control, so it's all available via files in those repositories. So those files can be accessed and shared with other tools as well.
Great, thanks, Erin. The next one I have is, does Actian Avalanche just work with Looker or with other tools as well? So I guess that was something I neglected to mention. Actian Avalanche supports standard interfaces like ODBC, JDBC, and .NET. So any tool that can connect through ODBC, JDBC, and .NET can be used with Actian Avalanche. In addition to that, we have custom connectors for technologies like Tableau and MicroStrategy and Power BI, and myriad others. So we don't just work with Looker, but we love working with Looker because it's just so simple. I mean, if you think back to what the AAA said about their selection of Looker, right? It's that it's just work. The proof of concept was a no-brainer. They can share that URL around the organization, and people can get the same insights into the data that the decision maker has already been able to deliver upon. So they liked the simplicity. They liked the fact that their customer support ratings are up there on a par with Actian. So yes, we do work with a bunch of other technologies, but Looker definitely has its own unique traits that make it very attractive for use with the cloud data warehousing technology. Okay, another question for Erin. Could you give an example of how media companies are utilizing Looker?
We have on our website, if you go to solutions, there's an industry specific section on media, so you can see some examples there that will probably do a more comprehensive job than I can cover in this Q&A. But there's a great case study on BuzzFeed, The Economist, and many others. So
great, thanks, Erin. Yeah, I think we both have websites with lots of really interesting customer success stories across different market verticals, right?
Yep.
Great. All right, so Pradeep, I guess there's one question for you on here, all right, which is, are the presentation slides available after the call?
Yes, we can send a PDF of the slides as a follow-up email. We'll do that.
Okay, great. That's it for the questions that have been submitted. I
Yep.
would invite you all to visit actian.com to take advantage of a free trial of Avalanche that we've got there that's available today. It does enable you to get started with Avalanche. We'll fund your first $500 worth of usage in your first 30-day period. And I'm sure you'd be very excited to go over to the Looker site and to connect those two technologies together. So thank you for your time and your interest. And Erin, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining.